Hey, this is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week's guest is Tony Blauer. Tony is the founder and owner of Blauer Tactical and the Spear System. Many of you probably also know him from his work with what was formerly known as CrossFit Defense or CrossFit Spear. Tony is a world-renowned expert with nearly 40 years of experience teaching people self-defense and how to overcome fear. This entire show is about fear in general, what it is, how to get through it, and even how to use it to propel you forward in life. Enjoy the show. Hey, this is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. I'm here with Tony Blauer. Tony, thank you so much for making some time for me today, brother.
I am excited to be on your show, man.
I've been a fan for a long time, man. You're the owner of Blauer Tactical and the Spear System, and I think a lot of people in the functional fitness community know you from your work with, what was formerly known as CrossFit Defense or CrossFit Spear. I think you said about a year ago, you started this new seminar that you call No Fear, K-N-O-W Fear, that is specifically geared toward the psychological component of fear. What specifically triggered you creating that program rather than continuing to only teach the physical side of things?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like when someone hears that you teach self-defense, or you teach combatives, or you teach martial arts, they think of it as just the physical and maybe a touch of the Zen fortune cookie spiritual. I've been coaching now 37 years. I have always been fascinated with mindset, fear management, performance, adaptive courage, resiliency, and this journey of almost 4 decades has led me down many paths to put together, kind of reverse engineer a program. And so quite literally, if somebody came to train in our Spear system, whether we were doing like a weekend course, a one-day course, years of training, everything we always did ran through 3 phases of self-awareness, where we would talk about emotional homeostasis, like is your body regulating emotionally? Because how you feel impacts how you think. It triggers different thoughts, positive and negative, and how you think will also, in the other way, change your physiology, your emotional self. And both of those states will change actually what you do. So whether we have actually a maxim that fear throttles everything we do, from who we talk to, therefore who we get married to, from where we live to how much money we make to how much weight you lift, and to whether or not you defend yourself, which I'm biased, but I think that's the most important skill any individual can have. The mindset part was always huge. So even if we were teaching somebody how to drop an elbow or throw a knee or finger gouge, eye gouge somebody, we would talk about, how do you feel about this? What are you thinking here? And how are you going to move? We were very holistic, very brain-based, before neuroscience identified brain-based learning, like literally. The shift, to go specifically to your question of when did No Fear, K-N-O-W, fear come up? Well, 20 years ago, we wrote on the whiteboard. You remember the No Fear shirt company?
Yes.
You remember that? So I grew up with tons of fear. I was a competitive skier, wrestler, gymnast. I always screwed up every performance because I was afraid to win. I was afraid to lose. I was afraid to let my coach down. I was afraid. And I was always thinking, if you're mountain biking, you could look at the path, or you can look at the obstacles. If you focus on the rocks and the trees as obstacles, you're probably going to crash. Mm-hmm. You got to look at the openings. And I recognized that I had kind of ruined my performance life because of how I emotionally looked at events. And when I started teaching self-defense, I holistically tried to integrate that there, because I knew that in any encounter that my student might experience, that if they didn't have, in other words, I didn't want what had made me struggle to impact them in something more serious than winning or losing a ski race, was maybe getting raped or getting dragged to a secondary crime scene. And so I always put it in there. And as years went by, I realized that I realized that the ability to protect yourself, in my opinion, inarguably the single most important skill you could have, that if you couldn't get off the X, if you couldn't push the metaphoric button, pull the trigger on your movement, it didn't matter how skilled you were. It doesn't matter how much you can snatch or how fast you can run if you're afraid of the competition or afraid of the person beside you, right? And so, and you look at when I'm working with CrossFitters or functional fitness people or other athletes, you can see someone who's really good form with PVC, and then they got really good form with a bar, and you start adding weight, and they've got the range of motion, they got the mechanics, they got the speed, they understand the hook grip, they got all their shit. But as you add weight, their form starts to deteriorate. And that's a psychological factor, in my opinion. Obviously, at a certain level, the weight's too much. But if you watch like a really good lifter fail, his form's really good when he fails. He just has to drop it. And so I recognized, whether I was training military, law enforcement, CrossFitters, that what got in the way was performance anxiety, which is directly, as you know, tied to managing fear. And I realized that a lot of people don't want to learn, and I find this strange because, of course, that's my bias. They don't want to learn how to defend themselves. They live in a bubble. They think the cavalry's going to rush in, or they're myopically focused on a specific martial art. They don't understand, that random violence. Like I always make a joke, violence doesn't care what style you study. Mm-hmm. It doesn't care whether you're liberal or Republican. Violence just happens. What are you going to do? And so about a year or so ago, and I tied this back to the No Fear T-shirt, is I bought every shirt because they had a cool logo and I loved what it represented. But I make the joke when I'm doing seminars, like all my shirts are defective because no matter which shirt I had on, I still felt fear, right?
Absolutely.
And people would giggle. But what I did is I would write No Fear on a whiteboard. We would talk about it, and then I would suggest that the idea of thinking there's a state, a place that you get where you have no fear, actually perpetuates more fear. What if somebody says, now you're like amazing, you're peaking, and then you walk out with butterflies in your stomach one day, or how superstitious athletes are, you can't find your lucky underwear or socks, right? And all you need is a thought with the weight of a fucking butterfly to change your game. I wrote something, it was a meme we created, that all movement is mental, that on game day, you're not going to be a different weight or a different size, or you're going to be an ectomorph instead of a mesomorph, or you're going to on game day, everything is mindset. And so I was leading to this over decades of stuff where I said, you know what? The day I launched the No Fear seminar, but what we spelled it was K-N-O-W. I want to know fear. I want to get to know fear. That if I can look fear in the eye, if I can go, come here, you little fucker, what are we going to do, right? Mm-hmm. Fear then becomes either something that creates stagnation, it's an extra weight, or it's cathartic and it releases you, it supercharges you. So it was really just me going, you know what, there are more people in the world who could benefit from understanding a new way to look at fear and the management of fear, to separate it from the physiology, the biology, and recognize that at the moment that we've got a fear spike, that we're nervous about something, our ability or inability to navigate the psychology of it is going to determine our next step. Do we shirk away or do we move through it? And that's really what spawned that whole thing. But it was like a 37-year journey to go, oh shit, this is what to do.
So what does the end product look like when someone successfully comprehends and practices what you teach them? What does it look like to be supercharged by fear?
What it looks like is self-actualization, and it's all relative. And that's a big fancy word, hopefully, to get people to lean forward and listen more carefully. That self-actualization is this. I come back from a trip. I walk in expecting to have my wife run to the front door, throw her arms around me, give me a kiss and go, I missed you. I walk in and I hear her say, you deal with it. And I'm like, what? Nice. I've been away for 3 days. What's going on? Olivia's not going to school. She's having a freaking fit. She's hyperventilating, and she said she's not going to her new school. So I go up to her room, and she's on her bed, like on her iPhone, just looking at stuff. And I go, "Hey, what's going on?" And she goes, "Oh, hi, Dad." And I go, "Hey, Mom says," and she, do you have any kids, dude?
No, not yet.
Okay, so I've got 3 kids. So you'll understand this. Like when you have kids, it's like she's like totally fine, and then when she realizes that I'm going to be talking about going to school, she like starts crying on cue like a professional actor.
Mm.
just oh yeah,
I had sisters. I know
yeah.
about
Okay,
it.
so yeah, exactly. So I'm supposed to be upset, right? And um, so what happens is the I say to her, I do like a little deliberate psychological distraction, um, and I say, "Hey, I just got back. I'm really thirsty. I want to go get some tea at Starbucks. Will you come with me?" She's like, "Sure, Dad." And she's 15 now, so this is like 2, 3 years ago. She's like 12 at the time. We go over to Starbucks. I got my iPad, and it's got my a chart called the cycle of behavior. And I'll get you a link for it so people can look at it. But it's a flow chart, what I call the neural circuitry of fear. And it's what we use when we talk about fear management. So I go in, I get a couple of teas, I come back to the car, I open up my iPad. So imagine this, like here's Dad. So I'm 57 now, so I'm 54. I got my 12-year-old, I open the iPad. It's on the page for cycle of behavior. She looks at me and she goes, "Cycle of behavior, Dad, really?" Like she just knows exactly because she's been to so many seminars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go, "Honey, what's going on?" And she goes, "I'm not going to school." And, it took me 15 minutes, but looking at the cycle of behavior, which basically, shows just these building blocks to making decisions under duress. And here's the thing about fear management is there are lots of things in life that you do with fear and trepidation. It's whether you do them or not. And that's the self-actualization part. And so allow me to finish the story real quick and we'll jump to something else. Because I want your listeners to understand the relevance. When I say self-actualization, I'm not trying to sound like a Zen monk or a sage. I'm talking about what did my 12-year-old need to do to turn the page in this chapter so she self-actualizes this next step in her life.
Mm-hmm.
She was afraid to go to a new school. And her dad had a skill set of talking about fear and fear management. I could have thrown her in the car and said, "You're going to school." I could have pulled her to school by her ear. I could have threatened her. I could have brought her to the guidance counselor. But I shared with her some tools to where she was looking down. And the chart is like it talks about your scenario, your belief systems, your neuroassociations, meaning how your brain links up symbols, the fear loop, goals that you would need to do to move towards action. And it's like, it's like this 12-step type, these blocks where you look at them and you go, "Oh." And so, what I tell people is like being lost and not having any clue where you are is not the same thing as is being lost, but you're looking at a map and you kind of know how to read the map. You're off course, you're not happy, but you kind of know where you are, right? So I came from here, I'm over here, I got to get here. This sucks that I'm lost. I'm going to be late. I'm a little bit scared, but I know where I am. I got a map. Mm-hmm. And so what this does is it just gives people emotionally, psychologically a map so that they can focus on what they need to do. And after about 15 minutes, what Olivia and peeling the onion with her using the map, she revealed that she's just afraid that nobody's going to like her and she's not going to know anybody. At which point Dad says, "Well, first of all, how can somebody not like you? You're so funny and you're beautiful. And of course, last school, you didn't know anybody. Did you make any friends?" "Yeah." "How many friends did you have?" "I had 3 good friends." I said, "See, like people just make friends. That's just life, honey. So do you think that anybody from your old school is going to be at this new school, the elementary school?" She goes, "I don't know." I go, "Probably they are because that's how it goes. It goes by area code. So somebody who's at your school, you're going to know somebody." She's like, "I don't know, Dad." I go, "I promise you, honey, I went through this." I said, "Listen, let's go to school and let's see if you see anybody. We'll just like kind of sneak around and see if you recognize anybody." So I got her to do that. Like I got her, and I make this joke that one day I'll write an article on it that coaching is not cheerleading. Most people are cheerleaders. They don't really understand how to get inside their kid's head, their athlete's head, their staff's head. I broke this down where I look at the path towards being a true mentor starts off with being a technician, then a trainer, then a coach. And everyone calls themselves a coach, but they're really technicians and trainers. They're cueing, bend your knees here, hips a little parallel, give your thumbs here. Okay, let's do that 10 times. Let's do that hard. Let's do that, let's take a day off. That is technician and trainership. If you've got somebody who understands what to do and they understand how to move their body and they're not performing, that's a mindset issue. And that's a different way to deal with the person. That's like arm over the shoulder mentoring, and then being able to recognize that some athletes, you got to, if you really are coaching people, you got to recognize that like it's not a one size fits all when it comes to the mindset stuff.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like a physical, or not a physical, it sounds like a framework for exactly how to move through anything in life that includes fear and trepidation, as you said.
Bingo. And this is why I said reflexively, and we didn't discuss what I was going to talk about. I didn't even know your questions. Why I brought up my daughter, because she went to school. She sees somebody from points like secretly, that girl, I know that girl. So I go, stay here. She jumps behind a wall to hide, like, oh my God, you're embarrassing me, Dad. I walk up to this kid who's talking to another kid, and I go, you see that girl hiding over there? She's like, yeah. I go, you remember her? She goes, yeah, that's Olivia. I said, she's kind of nervous about starting school today. I know you're with your friends and everything, but it'd be really cool if maybe you went and said hi to her or something. She's a little nervous about the first day of school. Mm-hmm. She's like, yeah, no problem. So I take 2 steps. I start to leave, and they're like already talking. And when Olivia came home from school, I went, hey, how was school? She goes, great, Dad. And like into her room, like nothing, right? But it was like, first of all, it excited me as a dad that I was able to say, hey, this is the map, and this is life. And plant that seed and watch her grow now as a 15-year-old, coaching me and other people in our family when we're like having trouble making decisions. I mean, just you see it. But I could jump to, Kevin Ogar brought us in to do a seminar. And, do you know Kevin personally?
I've met him years ago.
Okay.
Yes.
But you know his circumstance.
Absolutely.
Right. And most people do. Well, Kevin is like insanely mentally powerful, and he's a strong physically person, despite the condition he's in from the accident. So he brings us into the seminar, and he brings us into the seminar, and the biggest thing that I do, I love, okay, I'm going to show you to do a headbutt. Here's a palm strike. Here's how to kick somebody. But the most important shit we do, he said, like, you can only teach for an hour. What are you going to teach somebody? Like a headbutt, a finger jab? What are you going to teach them? I'm going to teach them how to manage fear, because I believe that will and indignation is really the fuel that has supported every victory in a violent encounter. And so the only way you can tap that is to manage your fear. And that's that how dare you moment. And we see it. So I've interviewed thousands of people over decades who weren't trained. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't have won that fight against that professional predator. And so here's my thing about, let's jump from a 12-year-old to Kevin Ogar. What do you think Kevin's best lift is? I'll help you to expedite things. It's a bench press. Why? Because Kev can't use his legs properly, right? Mm-hmm. And so he does the seminar. We do a 90-minute block on fear management. On Monday, he PRs his bench press by 20 pounds.
Wow.
Now, if you're mentally tough and isn't that insane? Mentally tough and super strong, you're making fractional PRs. You're not jumping 20 pounds. So, one of the questions we ask Mike in the seminar is kind of a provocative thing. I go, what is the weight of fear? People are like, look at me, like, whoa, what's the weight of fear? For Kevin, it was 20 pounds. And so we ask people, and it's something your listeners can do. It's kind of a cool, like, introspective diagnostic is, when you're intimidated, when you're fearful, what are you visualizing? And the slide that supports this kind of Socratic conversation is, the psychology of intimidation is when you're visualizing what your opponent can do to you instead of what you must do to your opponent. And that's the phrasing for personal defense. If you're looking at a weight, you're visualizing what the weight can do to you instead of what you must do to the weight.
Wow.
And that's all Kevin did, is he called me up like friggin' screaming like he won the lottery, going, dude, I was lying under the bar, and I realized that I was worried about the weight falling on me. And when I said all I did is change on the psychology of intimidation slide with your opponent, I changed it for weight, and boom, I went 20 pounds like right away. And I said, Kevin, if anybody in the world should have a concern about a bar hitting them, it would be you. That's a normal, rational fear. And it's amazing that just changing how you think, and this goes back to something I said about 10 minutes ago. It's an article I wrote in 1993 for law enforcement trainers called The Theory of Presumed Compliance. And basically, it says that how you think affects how you feel affects how you think, both influence how you move. And like that's the connection. And if we can get athletes, moms, dads, business people, brothers, sisters, anybody to go, wait a minute, my emotional system is going to influence my cognitive system. They're both going to talk to each other. And then I'm either going to sit on my bed and sulk, or I'm going to, pretend I have a stomach ache and not go to that event, or I'm going to or I'm going to kamikaze it. That's what I did. Right. And I still lost every event.
Right. I'm going to push it out.
Yeah. So it was like, I'll push the envelope, but I was past the envelope. It was interesting.
How important is it so talking about knowing fear and understanding our own fear, how important is it to either speak it aloud or to write about it and basically externalize those thoughts and emotions?
I think it's huge, man. It depends on your culture, and it depends on how you're brought up. I've asked the question. I remember asking a SWAT team that I was training in Texas. I said, if your number one guy, just found out his wife wants a divorce, one of his kids is on drugs, he didn't sleep last night, he's very upset, would you want him to come into work and go, hey guys, I don't know if I should go on this call with you? And it was amazing. The reactions were, no, man, that's his personal shit. He needs to get his shit together. I go, but somebody who's that emotionally distracted, might they make a mistake in a gunfight? How serious is that? Mm-hmm. I would want, but so it depends on the culture. In that type A kind of warrior, they don't want to hear that. And I would talk to them and force them to talk about it, going, you need to hear that. I want this guy rear security, and I want somebody else who's fresh. If this was a ball game and it was the ninth inning and I had to strike somebody out, and I went to the coach and I went, my fucking elbow is killing me, man. We're about to win or lose the World Series. What should I do? And my coach goes, don't be a pussy. Go in there and fucking strike this guy. Right. I'm going, no, my elbow's killing me. You don't understand. I don't have any juice left in this. Mm-hmm. Right. So I want, and it drives people crazy because around me, my team, I've got, 20 people on my mobile training team. We've got hundreds of affiliates. I tell them from day one, you start a relationship with me, that communication is everything. I don't care if you're scared. I don't care if you're late. I don't care if you're whatever. That in fact, we have a motto that the degree of clarity with which you do something determines its usefulness to you. And so that clarity is hey, I don't know. I'll come in. I'll go, hey, is this fixed yet? And you go, no, I'm still troubleshooting this. And my wife says to me, hey, my iPhone's been super, super hot. I can't even keep it towards my ear. So I look at her and I go, honey, I forgot to tell you, but I stopped working for Apple yesterday. I don't fucking know. She kicks me, right? I'm going you need to emote without with clarity and introspection, to not a subject matter expert, but a substance matters expert, right? Somebody who goes, who can really empathize with it and kind of guide you through it.
Right.
And I think that's part of the problem. But so my long short answer is yes. Especially, here's a great one. So I was helping coach Jeremy Kinnick years ago on some of the mindset stuff, and so at one of the, I think it was the fourth or fifth games that he was at, he gets eliminated from the snatch ladder, but failing at weights that he tosses around.
Right.
And so we go up after him, going, dude, what happened? And he looks at me with a smile on his face, because he understands this stuff, but his realization, his revelation happened a couple of days late or an event late. He looks at me with a smile on his face and he says, "You know what I realized? I realized I'm afraid of the tennis stadium." Because that's something that we could have stress inoculated during the week.
Right.
Right. And so
before you move on, just define stress inoculation for those who don't know.
Yeah. So stress inoculation is an obnoxiously fancy word to make me sound intelligent. It's part of like the law enforcement military training. And basically it means that you do scenario-based training. You replicate events so that your body acclimates to it. So you create synthetic stress that replicates what you're supposed to do. And so what happens is your body, when it gets into the real events, so if you knew that B was going to be the problem and you were training between A and C, like that, your body aligns really quickly. It just kind of like adapts to the new situation. But the trick is the trick is really is as closely as you can synthetically reverse engineering the experience you're going to have.
Love it.
Yeah, it's cool. Most people don't even do that. Like when I watch scenario, like our scenario training is like cutting edge. I mean, what we've done for 20 years for law enforcement military training, and we coined the term replication training, where people would say scenario, and I go, well, this is a simulation of a firearm or a replica. If I say replica, you immediately like the words as icon goes, that's like an exact replica. And so we would always say we need to replicate everything. Mm-hmm. And I even applied that. I remember, my son had to have an operation at a very, very young age, and there was risk because he was younger than the doctors wanted for normally to put somebody under, with gas in the operating room. So there was that risk. I was scared shitless. And I knew that my fear was going to trigger his fear, like a dog smelling fear. And so when he took him to the hospital, what I did was I took him a few days before and walked him through. I said, "Hey, we're going to come here for an appointment, and we're going to come here. We're going to sit here for a bit." And I got a really cool nurse or assistant there. I explained what I do, and I said, "You got to let me walk him through here and walk him back into one of the operating rooms and see the equipment, because I'm not going to I'll lose my shit." Like, because I didn't know if he was going to live through this, right? And they let me do that. But just doing one rep through there made it so smooth for my son and for me, and he turned out great. So that was awesome. But what I want your listeners to understand is what I did is, because I understood what needed to be done, I made it fucking happen. Mm-hmm. But we were able to walk through that real dress rehearsal, which is stress inoculation.
Right. Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but someone who struggles with being consistent in weightlifting, for instance, could a few days before, or say a week or so before their competition, they get a bunch of people to come to the gym. They create as close to that actual scenario as possible, get the nerves up, and have them perform under pressure, so that when they get out there, they've already gone through a level of what they're going to go through in the actual competition.
Yeah, if you can. So, most people are like, yes. And I was what popped into my head was some fighting examples that you'll always see, like the headliners of like a big fight, whether it's boxing or MMA. You'll always see pictures of them in the octagon or in a boxing ring, like dancing around. But it's not the whole card. It's like one or two fighters. I don't know if you have an image of that in your mind. Mm-hmm. I was talking about this like a couple of weeks ago to one of my coaches. I said, those guys have enough experience to know that just having the familiarity of the ring, because every ring they're put together by hand, even though they're made of like plywood and foam, and they're supposed to feel the same, but a board can slip, or wood can have a crack in it that nobody would know until you step on it. You can have a soft spot or a slippery spot. And these guys are so finely tuned machines that just doing that creates that homeostasis of comfort of like, I've been in here before, the other guy hasn't. But like, why isn't everyone invited in there? Because it's subject to experience. Like how many people just show up with their kid to the hospital, not thinking to do what I did. And of course, that would probably be frowned on if everyone did that. But it's just understanding that, listen, you make shit happen. This comes back to, again, self-actualization. When the doctor said your son needs to have this work done, let's talk about fear. I'm going, but he's too young to, have the anesthetic. And they were like, yeah, it's a risk. You have to sign this. My fucking heart's pounding. I'm in the fear loop. So you talk about no fear. I was like, okay, how do I mitigate this? What do I do? What do I know? Do I know a fear management expert? Hello. Do I know a fear? Like, I'm going, wait a minute, dude, you teach this shit. What would you tell somebody to do if they could? And I need you to understand, again, like, there was no fear. It wasn't like a state of no fear, N-O. It was, I need to know my fear. Mm-hmm. I need to look at my fear. I can't run away from my fear. I'm afraid that my son's not going to make it through. What do I need to know about that? He's got to have the operation. Okay. What do I need to know about that? Where are we going to go? What could throw me off and make me more emotional than I already am? And this is what I said earlier, is that this idea that no fear, baby, no fear, fuck fear, is like, well, no, wait a minute. There are certain things in life that there will always be fear, mm-hmm. but it's how you handle your fear, which is going to change how you move, right? And how you think.
You keep using this term, the fear loop. Can you define what the process of that loop is?
So, we start off and I go, hey, Mike, you're going to do this. And you go, I go, hey, yeah, enter this competition, man. I'm going to be there. Well, I'm going to document it. And you go, it's a local competition. And look, the workouts are things that I'm good at. And you're like all positive. And you're ready to go. We come in there and I'm going to document your victory and we'll show people that you're more than a badass coach. You fucking move well. And you get in there and you're going like, fuck, I'm going to win this. Look at everybody. And then, 10 minutes before the event's about to start, like Dan Bailey walks in. And he goes, guys, where can I sign up? And you're like, fuck, now I'm going to come in second. And then like 5 minutes later, Froning walks in. And you're like, hey, where do I sign up? And you're like, oh, fuck, I'm still going to make the podium, but I'm definitely going to come in third. And then like some other monster, walks in, friggin' Fraser walks in. You're like, no, but here's the thing is like the competition hasn't even started yet. The competition hasn't started. You haven't done any work and you've already gone from first place to fourth place in your mind. So the fear loop is when an external stimulus, either a visual or an internal stimulus, like a feeling, which creates a visual. This is what I mean by how you feel affects how you think. Puts you in a fear loop. And the fear loop is where you've got an erroneous belief, a negative visual neuroassociation. And we use two acronyms to help people recognize this. It's kind of cool. One acronym is false evidence appearing real, acronym for fear. And the other one is false expectations appearing real. So false evidence is meaning something outside your body, something you see. Oh, Froning, Fraser, Bailey, I'm in fourth place. Shit, right? Now, if you're thinking that, how's your lift going? How's your speed going? You're worrying about, fighting for fourth place, as opposed to just being in the zone and flowing. Mm-hmm. Then the false evidence creates the false expectation. And that's like this negative, mindset. And you see it, like I've had, athletes that I've coached who are like terrified of not burpees. They hate thrusters. So I see, and we're going to do thrusters, and you can see their body language change. And I'll walk up to them and I go, what's up? Nothing? No, I saw your body language change. Well, we got to do thrusters. Yeah? So like if you're already thinking, I hate thrusters, right? Think about the difference in your emotional, psychological state when someone says, and it could be something like I hate freaking liver as a food source, right? So if someone goes, I made liver for dinner, all my physiology will change. It doesn't matter that it's good for me. It doesn't matter that I'm iron deficient. I'm not putting liver in my mouth. Like, I don't like the taste of it. I feel sick when I eat it. Mm-hmm. And now someone go, or you can have a ribeye. I'm like, yeah, ribeye. Like, they're both meat, but your whole physiological, psychological system changes, as it relates to that. I know it's a goofy example, but it's the same thing. Like I've had athletes who I'm coaching remotely call me up and they go, hey, there's thrusters in the workout. And I'm like, yeah, a thruster is a squat. Do you like squatting? Yeah. And the other part of a thruster is a push press. If you put a push press and a squat together, you're doing a thruster. you like both of those movements. Don't do thrusters, do squats and push presses. And they're like laughing on the phone, right? Because what I've done is I've demystified the name to them. I've broken it up. Like, I don't like running a mile, so instead I run 400s.
Yeah.
Right?
Nice.
You know, it's just, and it's funny, where I got that from was like, you know, in teaching combatives to military and law enforcement, when we talk about gang and multiple assailants, I go, will you defend yourself against one person? They're like, yeah. What about two? They go, well, now it's getting tricky. What about three? Whoa. And I'm like, well, don't let the math beat you. Fight one guy at a time. Just do math. Subtract. You have two guys, subtract one. If you start looking at two guys, oh, there's two guys, they're 200 pounds, that's 400 pounds, they got 4 arms. Instead, I've only got 2 arms. Oh, fuck. They, you know, like if you start doing the math, you know, you're screwed.
Right.
You've got to figure a way to, because it's a choiceless choice, right? You're in the competition. You're in the fight. You got to go.
Have you ever heard the acronym "fuck everything and run"?
I have.
There's another one for you.
Yeah. So have you seen our "fuck fear" acronym, the T-shirt?
I'm not sure.
Maybe we'll share a link to that.
I love it.
Yeah. I will definitely send you. I will send you one. It's funny. We did we beta tested No Fear seminar last year in New York City, and had a really nice turnout. And I ran through the program, and like, I swear like a ton. I got to come up with a new word, because I say fuck like you know. And so I'd created an acronym for fuck, which was, you know, face fear, F, understand fear, U, control your fear, C, and then you know fear, K, fuck fear. And it was like just a trigger that when you got the fear spike, that you could say to yourself, fuck it, let's go. But you understood that fuck fear meant, I'm going to face it, I'm going to understand it, I'm going to confront and control it, and then I'm going to know it. And if I know it, that's as close as I can get. That's the self-actualization. The more I do it, the less I may have fear, but there will always be situations where I still got to move towards the danger or towards the obstacle. And I'm going to have this trepidation, but as long as I'm acknowledging it, I'm going to get through it. So I'm in New York. We printed some No Fear shirts, KNOW shirts, and some fear shirts. And I'm like, I said to my wife, I said, I don't want to print the fuck fear shirt. I'm okay saying it. I'm okay doing it on a whiteboard, but a shirt, that's a big shirt that says fuck fear. I'm in the fear loop about the fuck fear shirt. Right? So she's laughing at me, making fun of me. So she prints them, and we have an even amount of fuck fear and no fear, and fuck fear sells out at the seminar. I was like, damn it. But it was just ironic that here I am in the fear loop about printing fuck fear.
Right.
Like, but that's Mike, that's what's so beautiful about this whole thing is, like, you know, this is the thing is, like, I don't know if you know the blog site Medium. So I write articles on Medium sometimes. And one of the articles is titled something like "You're Not Your Best Selfie," and meaning like what we really show people is what we want them to see. And I spent a lot of energy and time kind of demystifying what real self-defense is versus what martial arts are. And I catch a lot of flack from the martial art community because they think I'm putting them down. And I spent a lot of time saying, hey, you're a really good trainer, but you're not a really good coach because you don't know how to fuck fear. And people get offended by that as opposed to inspired by that. And obviously I'm being crass right now just to make it more dramatic. I don't, typically talk like that to people. Some people I do, but it's really about, again, like this self-actualization. Why are you afraid to even explore this research and find a way to learn it? Because it just makes you, like, did understanding fear help Kevin Ogar self-actualize? Did understanding fear, even though my daughter at 12 can't regurgitate this, doesn't really understand it in terms of like linear progression or the cognitive steps and how we got her cognitive brain and her limbic system and amygdala to kind of cooperatively go to school. Who gives a shit, right? And that's, to me, what coaching is about inspiring a better performance.
So the first step in this whole process is obviously becoming aware of when you're feeling afraid. In my experience, I think many people are either so distracted or they just lack the self-awareness in general to even realize when they're having those emotions or thoughts. So how do you teach people to break out of that, to become more present to these thoughts and these patterns?
Well, we're doing one of the best things you can do right now is we're having a podcast about it, and people will listen to it and go, wait a minute, because we don't understand how we've been conditioned through society. So depending on when you grew up and how you grew up and who you influenced, your influences were, like emoting may not be part of your operating system. Like you would never say something, right? Like the example I gave with the SWAT cops, keep that shit quiet. The So it's a culture change where, like, if I were coaching a bunch of athletes, and it's an interesting thing. Like, I was on The Ultimate Fighter last year. I was brought on by my good friend Kiri, who's one of the best, kickboxing, MMA, martial art, like pro coaches in the world. He brings me on to talk to a group of 12. These are all world champions with a special edition Ultimate Fighter with like legit champs, not amateurs. Coming in there. So these guys have scars and everyone's got cauliflower ears. They've all been in fights, and I start off by going, how many of you feel fear before you go in the ring? How many of you feel fear? And only 3 of the 12 guys put their hands up, because the culture, if you're from South America, depending on where you came from, was you don't talk about that shit. You don't say you're afraid. And so only 3 of them put their hand up. I said, the rest of you, you don't care if you win or lose because you're not worried about whether if you lose this fight, you're cut by the UFC, or you lose this fight, or you lose an endorsement, or you lose. And now I got everyone's attention because we define fear differently. Like if you go into an event where you look at your athlete and you go, how do you feel? And they look at you and they go, great. And you go, good. But really what they're worried about is where someone that you didn't see this, someone came up and slipped in their business card and said, you win this event and, we're going to sign you with such and such shoe company or weightlifting company. And, we'll give you this much money a month. And now they're thinking about that. Is that going to change their performance? Yeah, it will. They may win. Here's the neat thing. But statistically, most people don't win if they're focused on, some prize as opposed to being the athlete in the moment, right?
Right.
And so, a buddy of mine I love this story. Maurice Smith, he won the Ultimate Fighter. He was a world champion Thai boxer, and I like interviewing victims of violence. I also like interviewing warriors, and getting, because I use it as a researcher to, not just vicariously live through their experience, but by asking them certain series of questions, I can kind of vet some of my contentions, and I get regular feedback, like as to whether our material is relevant,
right?
Whether and so I asked Maurice, I go, hey, Maurice, like before your fight, I notice your ritual is like you're lying on a bed, totally relaxed, listening to rhythm and blues, just chilling out. This guy over here is listening to death metal, pacing around. This guy's smacking himself in the face. This guy's sitting down on the bench there, and his foot's pumping like a million miles an hour, like he's pumping up an air mattress, like his nervous system's jacking, going crazy. I go, so everyone's dealing with fear a different way. So I study fear. Do you feel fear before your fight? Because you're like, it looks like you're just like lying in a meadow, like listening to poetry. You're so calm. So he looks at me and he says, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, yeah, sure. What? He goes, do you have a job? I go, yes, I do. He goes, are you afraid to go to work? I go, no, I'm not. He goes, me either. And he puts his headphones back on. Right. And it was like what a line from a movie, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine, like, I'm not going to go to work. This is my job. I beat people up for my living. That's how I feed my family. Now, when I tell fighters that story, it gets such a reaction. Like everyone's like, fuck, wow. Like it's like a line from a movie. I let them get over that. And then I say to them, you'll appreciate this as a coach. I go, if I gave you Maurice Smith's Spotify list and made you listen to that stuff, all of you may lose your fight. You can't just adopt somebody else's ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And where you're at when you're 12, what music does my daughter listen to? And what is she listening to as 15? And what is she going to listen to when she's 21? And so that's what I mean by, you asked me a long, long time ago, what does it look like when somebody understands how to look at fear? It looks like self-actualization, like you're turning pages in the next chapter of your life because you're looking at fear. I got a letter from a guy I've never even met. He bought one of my audio tapes called Cerebral Self-Defense, The Mental Edge, where I really break down the psychology of fear and blah, 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 and all this performance psychology, where I talk about like really provocative things where I go, I don't ever want to understand peak performance. I don't want to know what that is. Why? Because literally if I peak, that was it. So if I peak when I'm 30, what do I do when I'm 31? But what if I changed how I looked at it and I said, how about if I try and peak every day? Today, what is the best I can do as a dad,
Mm-hmm.
as an athlete, as a coach, as a mentor? And so, when, the 20-year-old Tony who got interviewed by Black Belt Magazine, 1980, where the editor of the magazine said, holy shit, this is very innovative stuff. Like I thought I was on top of the world. As a Canadian and being interviewed by Black Belt Magazine for a completely different holistic behavioral approach to self-defense. And I thought, this is as good as I'm going to get right now. And when I was 30, what I was doing when I was 20 was obsolete.
Right.
Also, more importantly, 30-year-old Tony would have kicked the 20-year-old Tony's ass in a violent encounter. Same as the 40-year-old Tony versus the 30-year-old and the 50-year-old versus the 30 or 40-year-old. It just keeps... But I really believe part of it is because of how I choose to think about performance as opposed to peak. I look at everything as a as kind of like a barometer. Okay, what's the pressure today, and what do I need to do? What do I need to perform at? And
Right.
so it became a performance enhancement mindset as opposed to a peak performance. I was focused on my capacity, not my potential.
So there's always this common phrase, some form of like the first step is always the hardest to take. So let's say someone's afraid to quit their job and go out and start their own business, or to work up the courage to, say hey to the person that they're really into. How do you get people to actually take that first step towards that self-actualization?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that in the abstract. If I had somebody in front of me and said, "Hey, I really like this girl or this guy, and I'm too afraid to," it would be like me sitting down for 15 minutes at Starbucks with my daughter saying, like, you're in the fear loop, like you're motivated. So the fear loop goes like this. What's your scenario? You plug it in,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's, I got to create an app. I got to create an app for cycle behavior where you kind of plug in your scenario,
Right.
and then it prompts you the next question, and you got to almost Socratically have a conversation with yourself. So the next phase of cycle behavior goes from scenario to motivation. Are you motivated? Yes. Where do you keep your motivation? In your mind? Like, yeah, I'm motivated. And so it's like, okay, you're going to go to the bar. You're going to go to the bar tonight, and you're going to say hi to her. You're going to talk to her. And when you get there, like you have two shots of tequila or vodka or whatever, and you're trying to, get that liquid courage. And I've actually had this conversation with people. And then what you start doing is you start visualizing her rejecting you. Because, if you walk up to her, if I said to you, if you walk up to her and you go, "Hey, my name's Tony," and then she goes, "Listen, man, what the hell took you so long to try and pick me up? I'm so into you, and I just thought maybe you weren't into me." And that's why, like, if you knew she was going to say that, how quickly would you go walk up to her? It's that fear of rejection, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that. And so it's getting people to understand the fear loop, that where they're living is in this kind of like primal emotional, negative psychological place of like I can't win, or she's not, I'm going to get rejected, or, I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to get, and it's just, there's no like if I told you say this and do this, it would be totally cheesy, right? And that's the thing about the system, that if you study the system, that the I've had people ask me, they go, hey, I've been studying your stuff for like 3 months. Like, I don't have the courage to do this yet. Like, what am I doing wrong? And I'm going, like, nothing. What do you mean? Like, when am I going to get the nerve to do this? I go, I don't know. like, because I'm not like a snake oil salesman. I don't know everything about you. That, like, when you're ready, you're ready. When you, like, one day you say, fuck fear, and you go.
Right.
And but you got to go through the first 3 steps where you actually face it without rationalizing it. You actually try and seek to understand it without skewing it or manipulating it and rationalizing it. So, if someone, like, I've had people go like, hey, you opening are you entering the open? And they go, no, I'm not entering, man. I go, why not? Just like support the community, go. And they're like, no. And I'm like, why? Like, why wouldn't you just be part of the team and work as a group? And, and like, at the end of the day, like, when I peel the onion back, it's because they don't want to come in last.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to see how much they suck. And so it's all tied to their ego, which is all part about fear, about my identity, about who I am. Because I'll look at some people and I'll go, I'll pay for your $25. You should just go do this and train with the whole team and everything. Is it about the money? No. Okay, then enter. And they still say no. I try to get them to see, this is just fear. I go, listen, you have no chance of winning, right? You're not going to the regionals, right? They're like, yeah. I go, then just go have fun. Go work out. Go put a little pressure on you. Shine that diamond, baby.
Yep.
But people are afraid of that. People are afraid of losing.
Of what other people think, right? That's why public speaking is the most feared thing in existence.
Exactly. It's an interesting thing, dude, because this is all part of that cycle behavior, managing fear. It's an amazing thing. If you substitute, like, people are afraid to lose for look bad, be embarrassed, and if I say to somebody, like, one of the questions we ask people in the No Fear seminar is, just as a survey point, is you go to a fine dining restaurant, you order some food and it's not served the way you like it, do you always return it? And maybe 10% of the class always returns it. Most don't. And I go, why not? And they go, well, I don't know what they're going to do with it in the kitchen. I'm going, like, why are you eating at a restaurant where you think somebody might spit in your food? Like that's another seminar, dude. You're in a different, but like how to pick a good restaurant. So, like, but if you don't return your food because you think someone's going to spit in it or drop it on the floor or do something, that's fear. Mm-hmm. Everything. And you would come back full circle to you saying, why did you start focusing on this fear? Because I realized that no matter what my bias was, you got to learn to defend yourself. You got to learn to defend yourself. You got to learn that at the end of the day, if I say to you, hey man, we teach self-defense the way a paramedic or a firefighter teaches CPR in one day: detect, diffuse, defend, situational awareness, verbal tactics, and simple primal gross motor movements. Why don't 1,000 people sign up to that? Because they have fear that A, you can't do it in a day. B, that there's some people who believe that if you study self-defense, that you'll attract violence. Have you ever heard that one?
Oh, absolutely.
But that's fear. Finding out that maybe they aren't good at this, or that they won't defend themselves, which would make them even more scared if they had to. That's fear, right? Mm-hmm. No matter what we're doing in life, I could get you with whatever, anytime there's doubt or hesitation to pull the trigger on any activity. It's because of fear, and the fear may be good. You might go like, no, I was going to actually run off this cliff and jump and try and fly, but I'm afraid of dying because I respect gravity. I go, that's good. Look how managing fear helped you live. Like, it's not a pejorative thing. It's not a negative thing. And that's why we call it no fear. Get to no fear.
Mm-hmm. I've got two more for you before I let you go.
Yes, sir.
What do you think of the concept of using fear to guide you towards things that really matter to you? The idea that something, like the more something matters to us, the more fear that is going to be naturally attached to that thing.
Yeah, but I also think that it's how many people have trouble saying I'm sorry, and how many people have trouble saying I love you, um, and then and to like the most important people in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Where one thing, and it's amazing, it's almost like it's genetic, where I had to teach my family to apologize more quickly and say I love you more quickly. And I, we have no, but it wasn't part of my culture. Like, honestly, I don't remember my dad ever saying I love you growing up to me. I don't have any recall of that. He grew up in a different generation where you didn't emote like that. And so the idea, and I'm trying to tie this back to what you're asking, is that it's something you really, really care about. Like, I'll go, like if my 20-year-old and my wife get into it, and they've got that classic, like right out of the movies relationship, right? And I'll talk to them individually, and they're both angry, and I go, listen, like, blah blah blah, just go tell your mom you love her. And then I'll go, and I've done this. I know we're on a podcast; they'll never listen to your podcast, but I've had them in a really big fight where I grab my wife's phone and I text my daughter going, I hate fighting with you. I love you so much. I can't wait for us, to get through this stuff. Let's focus on the big things and family. And then, my daughter come in and go, Mom, thank you. I love you. And like, not knowing that I did that. And I've done it vice versa. Right. Like, and it's just such a silly thing that it was just who's going to move first.
Mm-hmm.
And so in tying it to like the philosophy that I embrace, so what I mean by self-actualization is like now, so for my personal progression was, I really want to say sorry. I really want to tell this person I love them, but like, I'm afraid to do that because it's not comfortable, because I didn't experience it growing up. Right. But then, so my heart's pounding, and then eventually, you mutter it out and go like, man, I love you. And then, right. And then, but the more you do it, and this is like stress inoculation, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Now, if something happens, I recognize right away, and I'm like, hey, everybody, let's get together. I fucked that up. I'm sorry. And I just want you to know that I love you. I don't love you, but I love the person beside you. Like, whatever, I'm joking around right now. But it just comes out, and it's amazing sometimes with people who aren't used to that type of direct honesty and openness. But it totally changes conversations. So yeah. But doesn't this come back to everything I'm talking about? Is like that you manage your fear. You don't avoid the fear. You
Absolutely.
use fear as a fuel.
Absolutely. What you're talking about, a friend of ours taught us this term to call it. So between Adi and I, whoever brings us back to center by taking accountability for their part first is being the hero, right? So we call it be the hero in the relationship, and like take accountability first. So it's like a heroic thing to go first. And when usually it's looked at, well, it is a vulnerable position to go first, but that's the step that it takes.
Yeah. But here, and I love this, for somebody to adopt and then adapt and choose to be heroic requires managing fear.
Right.
Everything comes back to, I can sell the idea. There's a famous story attributed to Jack Warner from Warner Brothers, who repeatedly said, I want everybody to always tell me the truth. Always, even if it costs you your job, tell me the truth. Brilliant, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine the first meeting after he put that up on the wall, and that was like the mantra. That was their mission statement: total truth, even if it costs you your job. And imagine him there in a boardroom with 20 guys, and he goes, "This is what I want to do with the studio. This is what I want to do with this movie star. What do you guys think?" And the first guy puts his hand up and goes, "I really think this is a bad idea. Here's why." And he goes, "Fuck, thank you. You're fired." And the guy like leaves with his shit. So imagine the other 19 guys,
Right.
and everyone goes, now he goes, "What else? What else does people think?" 19 of them are going to go, "Fucking amazing idea. That guy's an idiot." Right? Because at the end of the day, security.
Yep.
And we don't like to feel vulnerable. We don't like to feel insecure. And so, and this is the more and more I talk about this stuff, bro, we go, "Yeah, but what about that? Is that fear management?" I go, you don't get anywhere in life without managing your fear. And if you don't have fear for something, right? So I work with a lot of military guys. I remember one year doing a course down at Fort Bragg, got in a little bit early, and the guys asked me, "Hey, do you want to go jumping?" And I knew they meant skydiving. And I had done it twice, and I'm afraid of heights, but I'd done it twice as a fear management experiment. And I said, like jumping, like up and down like this. And I stepped out of my seat. We were having a coffee at a Starbucks, and I jumped up and down, and they all giggled. And they went, "No, like skydiving." And I said, "No, I'm good. I've done it a couple times, and I'm fine." And they went, like, "Aren't you Mr. Fear Management? You don't want to go skydiving?" And they're making fun of me, right? I go, "No, I've done it. So I've managed my fear, and I've decided not to do it again unless I had to, but I don't have to. I've managed my fear by doing it twice on purpose, and now saying no to you, and you're not going to peer pressure me into it." So they're laughing, and I go, "You guys don't feel fear?" And they're like, "Fuck no. I've got 500 jumps. I got 700 jumps." They're talking. I go, "If you don't feel fear, then let me pack your fucking chute for you." And I smile. And they looked at me and they went, "Fuck that. You're not touching my chute." I go, "That's fear, isn't it?" In other words, when you do something enough, you get to a state where you just trust your systems. You trust your preparation. You trust your rituals. And then if you, and this is the area where I want to demystify that, you could ask a Froning or a Mayweather or me, and I'm not a good example, and I'll tell you why, where someone might go, you might go, "Hey, were you afraid when you got in that fight?" And they go, "No, man, that's my job." Right? But if you peel the onion enough, then you get the same response as like, "Hey, Mr. Special Operations guy, I'm going to pack your chute for you. You can't double check it." He's going, "No, I'm double checking it because I don't trust that you know what you're doing." And he understands the penalty for not preparing properly. And it's an interesting thing because I was doing years ago, I did a fear management seminar in New York City, shared a cab back with one of the participants, and he looks at me and he goes, "What's it like to have no fear, man?" And I look around, we're in a yellow taxi cab. So I look around and I do my De Niro impression. I go, "You talking to me? Are you talking to me, man?" And most people who've never seen a taxi driver with De Niro have no clue what I'm talking about. So I just dated myself. Like, how old is this guy? Like, and so he laughs because he got it, and it was more of a relevant movie back in the day. And I go, "What makes you think I have no fear?" He said, "Man, you just talked about fear management. Like, that blew my mind for 5 hours." And I said, "Are you afraid of a charging fucking mountain lion if you were out in a hike?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Me too." I said, "Are you afraid? Yes, you see those three guys leaning against the corner of the street there? We were in traffic, stop." He goes, "Yeah." I go, "If they stepped off the wall and you went, shit, these guys are going to jump me, would you be afraid?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Me too." And he's like looking at me. "I'm afraid just like you. The difference is you feel fear for so long that the event actually happens while you're still kind of primal fetal. Where I feel fear and it triggers cognitive decisions that I need to do. I need to do something about this adrenaline dump. I need to do something about this negative thinking. I need to do something right now or I'm going to get run over by this fearful vision or this attack or this bear or whatever it is." And so it's about respecting fear and then using it as a fuel to kind of like amplify what you need to do.
Right. Let's finish with this. Can you tell me a personal story of something that's happened in your life that you've been afraid of and walk me through exactly how you dealt with it?
And it has a happy ending or a shitty ending, or doesn't matter.
Totally up to you.
Yeah. So I'm going to, I got one for you, and I was about 15 years old. I was a competitive skier. I grew up on skis. So I grew up in Canada. As a Canadian, you're either a skier or a skater if you're an athlete. I was a skier, and my parents were both like on the National Ski Patrol. And like by the time I was like 13 years old, people thought if I continued on this trajectory that I would be representing Canada in the Olympics. Like I was at that level in other people's minds. And I was a badass skier, man. I competed freestyle, downhill, racing, giant slalom. So I'm at this big race at Mont Tremblant, and the race started above the tree line, so it's freaking nasty ass cold. The wind is blowing. I am so nervous for this race. It's a very famous zone race that impacted your standings across the country in different provinces, and I'm nervous as shit. I've pissed like 5 times already. I'm nauseous. I feel like I'm going to projectile vomit. I don't want to because it's so cold. I think it's going to freeze on my face, right? I'm joking. My coach comes up to me. It's like 1975. My coach comes up to me, and I'm like 5 minutes away. The skiers are going. Next guy, you're moving up. He's rubbing my shoulders. He's rubbing my knees to keep me warm. He looks at me, Mike, and he says to me, and I love my coach, he goes, "How do you feel, kid?" And I looked at him. I wanted to pee and I wanted to puke. And I said, "Great, coach." Right? Just like every fucking athlete does, right? "Put me in, coach." And he says, "Good." He says, remember, it's getting a little icy at gate number here. So remember, take that one wide. Yeah, got it. I take off like a bat out of hell, fucking skiing beyond the speed that I can control. I catch a tip, like the third gate from the finish line. And I wipe out so hard that I actually slide through the finish line, but I'm disqualified. Somebody in this race, they had timers at different places. A guy comes up to me after and says, "Man, it's too bad you wiped out because at the checkpoint where I timed you at this gate, you were almost a second ahead of the guy that ultimately won the race."
Wow.
And you'd have won that. And so, in a giant slalom race, that's like a mile in a car race or something. It was a significant amount. And what's the whole point of the story is this. I was so afraid to win. I was so afraid to lose. I was afraid to let down my parents. I was afraid to let down my coach. I was afraid that everyone saw me. There's Tony. He's the best skier at the hill here. He's this, that as good as I was, I couldn't believe what other people saw in me, because all I kept thinking is this: if I'm so good, then why am I so scared?
Mm-hmm.
And nobody had ever talked to me about that. Like, if you're excited to do something, if there's adrenaline, then that feels like butterflies in your stomach and your breathing changes and your palms may be sweaty even though you're outside in the cold. And that's normal physiological changes in your body, but they become adversarial. They become oppressive if you don't know how to look at them,
right.
If you don't know how to think about them. And most people don't. We're not taught that. We're taught, fight or flight syndrome. That has nothing to do. I don't need to understand the physiology and the biology of fear. I only need to understand the psychology of fear. I need to understand self-talk, because in the fight, you can't call me up. And in the event, in the middle of like a snatch or a circuit or whatever, they can't go, "Hey, Mike, what should I do here?" Or think, "I'm thinking negatively." Like they're in the event. They got to be their own coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so my big takeaway of that was that statement of that: if I'm so scared, if I'm so good, then why am I so scared? And that becomes, what is the weight of fear? That my fear actually changed how I moved. And those were some of the seeds and some of the experience that years later, 20 years later, I remember that event and that story, and I'm like, holy shit. So I'd always been working towards understanding the big why, and you've got like Simon, is it Sinek who does that, talk, like, what's your why? I wrote an article in 1986 for Inside Karate magazine that was titled "A Word to the Wise," and wise was spelt WHS. that if you don't know why you're doing something, you can't rely on it.
I love that, man. It's so empowering to continue to hear that top performers in every field have the same fears and self-doubts, right?
Oh yeah.
It's just simply empowering.
Yeah. And my whole thing is like, and it doesn't matter like age, and you could take somebody who's like got their shit together here and like I, so we mostly work with law enforcement and military, but I've been in classes with guys that I know have been in gunfights, that know have been in ambush, that have survived these things. And I'll go, okay, Bob, why don't you tell everyone how this goes here? There's a trainer development course. And they're like, okay, so, excuse me. And they're like, fucking, it's public speaking. Can't do it.
Right.
You can kick down a door with a gun and get in a gunfight with a fucking predator, which you and I would go, I don't want to do that. But you and I can get up and teach, right? And so you can get what's interesting is you can get really good in one arena and not have that competence or confidence transfer over. So you can be the best cyclist in the world, and if you're afraid of swimming and I push you in the pool, you look like an amateur athlete. You don't look like a world-class cyclist. And you can be a great swimmer and I put you on a bike and you've never had clips on and you wipe out and fall and everyone goes, look at that guy, he's such a shitty athlete. But no, he's the best swimmer in the world, right? Like skill just doesn't transfer. And the acclimation part of the mindset doesn't just transfer, which is why I'm like so passionate about trying to figure out, how to share with people a simple formula just to look at fear. And then you plug in your scenario because the formula doesn't care, what the event is. The formula is the formula.
Right. Well, this has been phenomenal, man. Where can people find out more about your seminars, your programs, and keep up with what you're doing?
Well, I guess we're all over social media like everyone else. So I've got, Instagram, Tony Blauer on Instagram, spear.system on Instagram. We got, Tony Blauer Spear System on Facebook and Tony Blauer on Facebook. And of course our website, Blauer Spear. Blauer is Blauer, Spear, SPEAR, one word, Blauer Spear. And those are the best places.
Awesome, brother. Appreciate your time, man. This was great.
Thank you, man. I had a lot of fun. Appreciate it.